Welcome to the Martinus Cosmology podcast. My name is McGovern and I'm your host today, and I'm very happy to once again welcome Karin Jansson from Sweden, who is one of the teachers here at the Martinus Center in Klint, Denmark, where we are in the middle of the international courses, where we have guests who speak not only the Scandinavian languages, but English, German and Spanish. Welcome, Karin.
Thank you very much.
So our subject today is conscience. What is conscience, Karin?
Yeah, that is of course a very large subject, and we will get into it today here a little bit. But I think that all people know about conscience because it's something that you feel inside of yourself. And of course it is a concept that is widely used, or I think in almost all languages. So people know about it, but maybe they don't know what it really is, or what's the purpose of it, or if you should listen to it. Because today we are quite materialistic, and people might think that when there is some kind of pain or something uncomfortable inside of you, you should push it away. You shouldn't believe in those things any longer. But from a cosmic point of view, conscience can be something that you can really learn from.
So when I think about conscience, I think of good and evil, and what's evil for me and what's good for me, and that maybe it's not the same as what's good or evil for other people.
Yeah, of course, because Martinus, he says that conscience is actually a conflict in our consciousness, in our minds, between good and evil. And through our evolution, we will realize that what is good and evil, that will change. I mean, if we go back 1,000 years ago, we were Vikings in this part of the world, and we thought that killing was something really good, and it didn't make us feel guilty at all. And today we have developed, and of course we all think today that killing is something bad. So it is constantly changing, you could say. So you could say that conscience is a kind of guidance inside of yourself to tell you what is right and what is wrong. And what is right, it comes from our ideals. It comes from what we hope we can achieve.
Yes, and our ideals, where do they come from?
Yeah, of course they come from our lives, and also of course from books and philosophies and what we study. But mainly it comes from us experiencing different difficult things which gives us pain and suffering. And from that we learn, as I said, with killing. Probably we have been killed for so many times that we don't want to be killed. We don't want to kill any longer. We get an empathy, or a capacity for empathy inside of ourselves. So it comes along the road, you could say, and our conscience is getting, in a way, smaller and smaller. I mean that there are less and less things that we can actually do. We cannot hurt people, we cannot kill, and we cannot do bad things so much any longer, because then we will feel guilty about it.
So this growing sense of guilt about doing things that hurt others reduces the conscience. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. You could also say that it's expanding. It depends on how you see it, but it reduces the amount of acts that we can do against others. Yeah. We can do less and less that hurts other people. Yeah.
But then there's the force of habit. Which can be very, very strong. I think Paul expressed it in the Bible when he said, "The good that I would, I do not, but the evil that I would not, that I do." And I think there he's talking about having very good intentions, very high ideals, but despite these best intentions not being able to live up to them, he seems to be split between ideals and his actual behavior.
Yeah, and aren't we all?
Yeah, aren't we all? It's a common situation.
Yeah, exactly, because there is not only one level inside of us, there are many. And we are split between this humane side that is growing within us and the animal side that has been with us for such a long time. And it has become an automatic function in us to react with anger or being irritated, being sorrow, wanting to fight back and revenge and so on. So many of these things, or all of these things, come from our past thousands of lifetimes when we were animals and primitive beings. And there it has become an automatic function. But nowadays we are slowly getting away from it. But of course it's still there in an automatic way, that when someone hurts you, you might be very sorry and you want maybe to hit the person back or something like that. So then we have to sort of catch ourselves in that moment, you could say. But then we have also humanity growing inside of ourselves. So there is this conflict. Which side should I choose? The good or bad? The humane or the animal? The egoistic or the altruistic? So we have a constant conflict going on, you could say. But that is exactly the point where our conscience can help us, because we can feel inside of ourselves what is the right decision. And if we didn't choose that one, then we can feel it a lot afterwards, because it gives us a lot of pain.
Martinus comments on this dilemma that Paul had, that the good he wanted to do, he couldn't do, and the evil he didn't want to do, he did, by saying that it was easier to react with revenge or aggression than to react with kindness and love and forgiveness. But then it's a question of mobilizing one's will.
Yeah.
Isn't it that you have these ideals, you begin to see that the doing the things that you don't want to do causes unpleasant reactions, and you want to react in another way, but then you have to mobilize some forces within you, because the evil reactions, so to speak, are so habitual, so it requires quite an effort of will to change the situation. It's like turning a big tanker at sea. It's a big change of consciousness to listen to one's conscience and act on one's conscience.
Absolutely, and I think that today it's also even more difficult, because people are not religious any longer, so they are not afraid maybe of being punished by God or something like that, to go to hell, so then you just have yourself. You have to decide yourself what's good, what's evil, what will I do in this situation. And of course, as you say, we need to mobilize the good force within us, and we have to look out for what I call the tiger within us, which wants to be aggressive and wants to have an easy solution to something in front of us. So we have to watch out for that, and that is also what Martinus is talking about, to have to be wake up in our conscience.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's a constant work, I would say. But if we know that our conscience is pointing to the right direction, then we can start using it a bit more. Because in a materialistic worldview, we might just suppress it and say it has no meaning, I do what I want. And we can't see the larger consequences of that, of course. But it's really, I think Martinus really shows us here that we can really make a difference through how conscious we are about our conscience.
So, if we look at the evolution of humanity, who has a conscience? What is its function?
Yeah, you could say that it is a function where we are right now when we have this conflict between bad and evil.
Good and evil.
Good and evil, thank you. So you could say that conscience is something that is very important for us today, because right now we have this conflict between good and evil. But if we look back in our evolution, for example, when we were animals, then of course we didn't feel guilty if we were killing or, well, harming and things like that. It was just part of our nature. So, but when we became human beings, then slowly we have developed this conscience, so which is getting more and more sensitive, as we said before. But then in the future we will become real human beings, and then we are totally in contact with what is good, and we cannot really act in any other way. So at that point we don't really have a conscience in a way, or it's everything there is, you could also say. There is only the good part. So it's actually very important right now, and we can see that it can be very hard on people. For example, if we take the Vietnam War, we know that many soldiers came back from that, many American soldiers, and of course there were many soldiers who had been killed in the war, but there were actually more that killed themselves afterwards.
Yeah, they had such a bad conscience about what they had done.
Yeah, I think that was part of it. And it's not really known in natural science today that this is so difficult for you to carry this guilty conscience around, that you might rather kill yourself. I mean, it's terrible, but that is the kind of pain there is in it. And then, of course, we should really listen to it. Don't go into war if you have that kind of feeling.
Yeah. If you don't have the heart to kill, then you're really going to suffer if you do kill.
Yeah, exactly.
Even if you kill accidentally.
Yeah.
I think Martinus mentions in the little book, The Mystery of Prayer, if you happen to kill someone accidentally in a car crash, for example, and you don't have the heart to kill anybody normally, you can suffer terrible pangs of conscience.
Yeah.
And there he says something about using this prayer: forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those that trespass against us, is really important for bringing us back into a kind of mental balance, so we can go on with our lives without it being destroyed by these guilty feelings, this bad conscience.
Yeah, and the more we develop, the more we will feel guilty just about small things.
Yeah.
So, I mean, here at Clint, for example, we are very much training to be nice to each other. And someone told me yesterday that he really had a guilty conscience because he got a little bit into a conflict here with someone, and it was so painful. So he said that now when I'm at this place where the level is a little bit higher, then it's really hurting just to do some very small things. Yeah,
the slightest inconsiderate remark can give you pangs of conscience.
Yeah, exactly, because we don't kill each other any longer, hopefully, but we might sort of kill each other with the way we talk.
One can kill other people's joy in living, for example.
So
by criticizing, for example.
Yeah, criticizing. It's still the same principle. So we will become more and more sensitive, we could say. So it's actually right now that we should wake up to our conscience and listen to it carefully. Yeah,
and have our consciousness sort of on the alert, keep it awake and present and listen to it.
I totally agree.
Mm-hmm. So what's the overall plan for mankind? Where is our conscience taking us? You mentioned something about a real human being. Maybe you could say what you mean by the term real human being.
Yeah, it sounds a bit strange because we might think that we are human beings today. And Martinus, he calls us terrestrial human beings, which is a kind of mixture between the animal kingdom and a Christ consciousness. So, I mean, Jesus, he came to this earth to show us a perfect consciousness and to show how you can be loving and forgiving to just everybody. And of course, he showed it on the cross when he said, "Father, forgive them," about the ones who were killing him. So, of course, that is the kind of consciousness that we will evolve. And it has to do with neighborly love. It has to do with understanding that everybody is at the right step in evolution. And there is really no reason why we should be angry with each other. We are just like, we are going on climbing a ladder, and we are at different positions on this ladder, you could say. So this is what it's leading us. And Martinus also said that people like Jesus, great leaders, they could actually show us the right way. And their conscience, it was like a pillar of light that was leading people. So conscience can also be seen as something outside the person, if you have more of a psychic view.
Yeah.
And he also gives the example with Moses, for example, who led his people out of Egypt. And then the people saw this pillar of light in front of them, which led them through the desert and so on. And Martinus says it's actually the light from Moses. So the conscience is like a light part in us. He actually calls it a shadow. It's a bit strange. He says we have a dark shadow and a light shadow.
Yes.
But let's say that it's a light part of us.
Yes.
That can lead us, and if it's very big, like with some big leaders, then it can also lead other people, and it can influence other people.
There are pioneers in world history who are guiding humanity forwards towards a higher moral standard, and they are like leading lights. We say in English leading lights, and the Bible talks about Moses and this pillar of light. So a leading light is a light one can look up to and say, "Oh, I would like to be like him." Or even in issues that don't have so much to do with morality, but for example, if someone plays music better than you, then you can think, "Oh, I would like to play like him." Or if they write better than you do, you can really be inspired and say, "How do you write like that?" And you can really strive to follow this leading light, to see how they do it.
That's really interesting that you say leading light, because it seems to be more or less the same thing as Martinus is talking about.
Yes.
That when you have evolved, you have this light that is actually shining around you. And somehow this can be sensed by other people, even if we cannot really see it. It can be sensed, and you can you can sense that this is someone I would like to follow somehow.
Yeah, you can see someone dealing with a really difficult situation in a way that you couldn't imagine being able to do yourself. I think, how did they manage that situation so beautifully?
Yeah.
And it can be really inspiring. So you can begin to think in another way about how to deal with conflicts or whatever. So there are many things in society that can give one a guilty conscience. For example, if you see beggars on the street and you don't know quite what to do, should you give them money or not? What's the most helpful thing in that situation? There's a lot of guilt about the climate and what we're doing to our environment at the moment. There's a lot of guilt about our eating habits. Some of us are overweight, some are too thin, some people eat meat, some people are vegetarian. There's a lot of discussion about what is the best way to eat, but one can have a guilty conscience whatever one eats. So what's happening? What is a guilty conscience?
Yeah, of course, a guilty conscience is when we don't... when we are not acting out of the high ideals we have, and we cannot really reach the point that we would like to be. then of course we feel guilty. And I mean, our ideals are in a way faulty if we think that we are actually there. But they are also something that can inspire us, so it's good to have them. So every time you have a guilty conscience, you will understand, okay, I wasn't really at that level. And you feel the pain inside of yourself, the guilt. But I mean, then you can also stop yourself and you say, well, that's the way it happened. This is the best I could do. I have to forgive myself. And you can actually also pray for help in that moment. So it's a good way of slowly getting to learn yourself. And then you also know in the next situation that you might act a little bit differently because you don't want to cause that guilt inside of yourself any longer. But of course, our world today is full of different things that you have to choose between, and you have constantly to do different things, and of course, like you said, beggars and the climate, and there are lots of things that is putting in pressure on us. But I think that this is in a way very good, because we have to think about these things in order to create a moral from within.
A moral standard?
A moral standard, yeah. Because before we were told by Christianity or religion or tradition or family how you were told how to behave. But if we don't believe in that any longer, and we believe that we should be free and individuals and so on, then we have to see from within, how do I want to live my life? And that is building up a moral standard from within. What can I actually do? What can my heart allow to be done in a way? So that is sort of bringing morals inside of you, from the inside and out. And I think we all have to do that. So all of these conflicts, they are actually opportunities to learn and to think, and also think about the situation on this planet. And then it's another thing that we can't solve the situation of rich and poor when we see the beggar on the street. We can't solve the whole situation on this planet with having rich and poor people. But at least we start thinking about it and we start feeling about it.
Yes.
So I think it will lead us forward. And that's why we are meeting all these difficult situations.
Yes.
That's how I think about it. So it hurts, but it has to hurt.
So our conscience is waking up, and we are developing an inner sense of right and wrong, rather than something being dictated from the outside. Yeah,
correct. And you could say that this will increase our sympathy for other living beings, and it has to do with other people. But we were also talking about the climate crisis, and there we can have more and more sympathy, if we can call it sympathy, for nature and the planet.
Yes.
We have to understand that we are part of this planet. We have to take care of it. And you also talked about eating habits and so on. And there we will have to start to love our micro beings and all the living beings inside of our body, the organs and cells and so on. So there are so many fields that we have to work on right now that people haven't worked on before. They worked maybe on neighborly love because we were taught to do that, but now we also have macrocosmos, we have microcosmos.
Yes.
Many new things to learn.
Yes, so Martinus is expanding this concept of neighborly love to include not only human beings, but the animals, the plants, and all the organs and cells and microbeings within our organism, and also the planet we live on. So he has really expanded our area of responsibility, our sphere of compassion, really. And I don't think you can develop compassion without going through a phase of having a very guilty conscience, because you realize what you're doing. You wake up gradually to where you're not being loving.
Exactly. So a guilty conscience is like an alarm clock.
Yeah.
And it is important to do something about it. You shouldn't have that alarm going on because then you get crazy.
Yeah.
And you might get stuck in anxiety or depression and so on. So it is an alarm to tell you now it's time to think about how you can do this in a better way.
So it's important for one's mental balance to listen to one's conscience?
Absolutely. But then, of course, it is also important to see the difference between a bad conscience and shame and the concept of sin that we have had in religion.
Yes.
Because all of these feelings can be mixed up a little bit inside of ourselves.
Mm. And how would you differ between them?
Yeah, I mean, the concept of sin, we know it goes back to Adam and Eve and the paradise and so on. But it is an idea that God has decided what is good, and if you're not doing that, then you're a sinner. And, well, we know the punishment for that could be really bad. Like going to hell.
Eternal fires of hell.
Yeah, but Martinus, he says, there is no sin. It's just that we are on different steps of evolution and we will understand different things. So, I mean, you don't tell a 3-year-old boy or girl, oh, you should be able to read and you should be able to behave in this way and so on, because we know it's just a child. Mm. And we will just forgive it for being on that level. And we know that it will grow. But it's the same with us. We also have to forgive ourselves that we couldn't react in another way. That was the step we were on. So actually there is no sin. There is just mistakes, Martinus says, because we don't know more. Mm. As also Jesus said on the cross, forgive them because they don't know what they are doing. Mm. And that's so it's not like there will be eternal flames. But we are creating karma. So, of course, if we are hurting someone, we will also get that back. And in the long run, we will learn from it.
So, how does Martinus define the term, the forgiveness of sins?
Well, he says that through our evolution, we will gradually become more humane because we will meet lots of violence and aggression, and then we will learn, that feels bad, it hurts, and so on. So gradually our capacity for love and compassion will grow. And which means that at a point, the karma that you have sent out, bad karma, aggressive karma, violent karma you have sent out, it can't reach you any longer because you have evolved. You are not at the stage where you can actually do the same thing. And if you can't do it yourself, then you won't meet it. Mm. So what we meet is always a reflection of who we are. Maybe we don't want to see it.
No.
Always. But it is a true picture of who we are. So that's the best way of learning about ourselves. It's reflecting upon our daily life.
And you mentioned the term shame. How does shame differ from having a guilty conscience? How would you define shame?
Yeah, I think shame, it more comes from us living in flocks when we were animals. We lived together in groups, and that was essential to survive. And of course, if you were sick, for example, then the other animals might even kill you or kick you out of the flock, or if you were different in any way, you were not really allowed. There were very strict rules how to behave in a flock. So this has created many automatic functions in us that we are very afraid of not fitting into the group or society or whatever circumstances we are in, and then we will feel very much ashamed of ourselves if we don't meet what we think other people expect from us, or what we expect from ourselves. So, I mean, both these concepts, to be a sinner and to be ashamed of things, that is something that we should try and get rid of, because it's not helpful for us. We shouldn't any longer live in flocks. We should become individuals. So, and this is of course difficult, and it will cause pain when we are taking the steps out of the flock, out of the traditions, when we are becoming ourselves. But the reward will be very big from that, because then you can start really develop your inner qualities, your creativity.
But it can be a little lonely to go against the flock. For example, if you, just to take an easy example, if you're the only vegetarian in the family, or you're the only person in your environment who's interested in a particular subject, and you really want to study that, but everyone else thinks it's ridiculous, but for you it's really important. It can be really lonely to go against the flock in that sense.
Absolutely. And you could say that it's a bit of carrying your cross.
Yeah.
It's there is some pain to it, but of course you need to do it to get on. So you get to a point where you think, okay, the other ones are laughing at me, but I will do this anyhow because it's more important to me.
Yeah.
So I think shame is something that we step by step will come out from, and we will not be ashamed of the ones we are. And I think we can see that young people today, they have so many ways of being, ways of dressing, different subcultures and so on. So it's actually more easy today, and with internet and so on, you can find new friends in the area where you are interested.
Yeah.
So it is easier in many ways, but we will all have to go through shame, I think. But of course, then we should also think a little about how we bring up our children, because we can say things to them to make them feel shame, and that could be a way of bringing them up, because then we know that they will do the things that we want. But it's not a good way of bringing up children. So we should be very aware of what we are doing.
I guess their self-esteem would be at risk if you do that.
Yeah, exactly. So I think we have probably most people have been brought up with shame.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so
shame forced on you by the church, by the schools, by parents, by the conventions of society around you.
Yeah.
By rules of fashion, even.
Yeah. Today that's a very big field of shame, that you're ashamed of your body and what you look like, and having the right clothes and so on.
Yeah.
But it's something that we have to be aware of, and the less we use it ourselves, the less we will also have other people judging us, you could say. That. So it's constant work, and we have to be awake here, because it's also an automatic function. But being really ashamed, it's a terrible feeling, and I think in a way it's a worse punishment than hitting a child, for example.
Really?
Yeah, it could be worse, giving it shame.
So they have an unbalanced view of themselves for the rest of their lives, maybe? Yeah,
and it creates a lot of anger inside of you, that you cannot be yourself. So, but those are both shame and sin. That's something that we should get away from. But the conscience, this is this field of light inside of ourselves, and that is something that we should listen to.
Yes.
So totally different things here, you could say, but it resembles each other inside of us. If we are not really used to it, so we have to keep ourselves awake here.
Yes, because if you don't use your conscience, if you go against your conscience, you can feel guilty, and then you could feel ashamed.
Yeah.
But then I think it's good what you said earlier to realize that we're on a ladder of evolution. We're slowly climbing it, and we have a lot of habits from the past, and it takes time. We have to fall. We have to make mistakes.
Yeah.
And forgive ourselves, pick ourselves up, and then take the next step.
We can say that forgiveness is, of course, a very important part here. You have to forgive yourself for being who you are.
Yes.
And I mean, in the past, it was done with religious ceremonies.
Yes.
Like
confession.
Like confession, for example. It was, and then the priest could say, your sins are forgiven. And you felt released.
Yeah.
So it's a kind of psychology. It's you could say that was given to us to help us. But today people don't go to confession, I think, so much. Not in our part of the world.
Certainly not in Scandinavia.
No.
Not so much at all.
But in a way they go maybe to a therapist.
Yeah.
And it's a little bit the same. Yeah. You open your heart.
Yeah.
And it has the same impact on you.
Yes.
If you tell about these things, it will you will have a better feeling afterwards. But you could also say that many people, if you can't go to a therapist, it might be that you try to suppress these feelings.
Yes.
Taking pills and alcohol, or just distracting yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. So people can really destroy themselves with a guilty conscience.
Yeah, I think we don't really discuss that. We don't know that in our society, that people are getting so sensitive today. And they might not know it themselves. It can be that they have a guilty conscience because they are eating meat, or because they have been through an abortion, or something like that, that is not in our society regarded as something wrong, but inside of themselves it's wrong.
Yes.
And then, of course, in the long run, if you can't get this explained, it will create depression.
So maybe there should be a science of conscience.
Yeah, I think that in the future. But I mean, already today you talk about highly sensitive persons.
Yes.
And I think one part of that is that people have evolved, so you are more sensitive to what you meet.
Yeah.
And in that way you have to be more sensitive with the acts, whatever you do.
Yeah.
And it might be that you cannot do things that are normal to other people, like eating meat or going to a football match and screaming a lot, or whatever, just gossiping. So there are many things that we can't do today if we are becoming sensitive.
Some people talk about conscience being a kind of inner voice.
Yeah.
My experience is that this inner voice is something that grows and demands to be listened to sooner or later. But it can be easy to say, I'm not going to listen to you, but it will start shouting at you and saying, you have to listen to your inner voice.
Yeah, and of course it sounds a bit strange today to talk about inner voices, because it's almost like a mental disease today.
Oh, I didn't mean it in that sense.
No, but if you put it in that way, I mean, probably you don't talk about that you have an inner voice, because it's like, I think everybody has an inner voice. It's an inner guidance that we can get.
Yes.
And the more we pray to God, the more we talk to God, the more we listen to it, it will become like a conversation that we are having inside of ourselves.
Yes. Yeah.
And that is something that can lead us. And you told me before we started, that it can actually lead you very practically if you're on you're walking somewhere and you're asking, well, should I take this road or that road?
Yes.
And there can be an answer from within.
I think if we take an example from Martinus' own life, if he was in doubt about what to do, he asked himself, what would Christ do in this situation?
Yeah.
And he got the answer immediately. So then he was sure that his decision was living up to his own ideals.
Yeah, so the thing is here that we should listen to ourselves, and we should listen to this inner voice or inner feeling, or it's difficult to say really what it is, because it's not a voice talking, but it is like we just know what is the right thing to do.
It's like a kind of inner meter saying, now you've gone too far to the right, a bit to the left, and then you go to the far to the left, back to the middle, and so on. Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, but probably we will develop our own meters, our own ways of communicating with God and our conscience.
Yes.
So this is a very interesting and wonderful way of developing ourselves, I think.
Yes. So what does spiritual science teach us about conscience? Is there some point in development, our own development, where spiritual science can be useful in developing a conscience?
Yeah, because, I mean, we do develop a lot through suffering. That's the way it is. But now people have come to a point where we can also use spiritual science, and that is because we have developed our faculty of intelligence. We can analyze, we can think. We have been to school, we might have a degree and so on. So this period, it's just 100 years or something like that people have had the opportunity to go to school. It is changing really the way that we can use spiritual science. So Martinus says that there are some basic things that we have to understand about life. We need to understand evolution. We have talked about that today, how we slowly evolve from being animals to becoming humans and really humane. So we have to understand that, because otherwise we might just think that we are strange if we are highly sensitive.
Yes. There's something wrong with us.
There's something wrong with us. It's a kind of diagnosis for something.
Yeah.
But it's not. It's a diagnosis of becoming a real human being.
Yes. Yeah.
But we also have to understand karma a bit. That what we do will come back to us, and this is what will make us sensitive. It will make us grow. So. We need to understand that, and of course nothing of this will happen if there isn't reincarnation.
No,
that's a basic thing.
Yeah, none of this makes any sense without reincarnation, because you can't develop a 100% perfect conscience within one life.
No, and of course if you just live one life, then why should you pay attention to your conscience? Just do what you want.
Yeah, it wouldn't make any sense at all.
No.
And reincarnation is a very important part of Martinus's world picture.
Yeah, and you have to understand you have an eternal life, and we need to understand in what direction we are going right now, and that is actually to create a kingdom of peace on this planet. Yes,
peace on the planet, peace within our own psyche.
Yeah.
Peace in our families and in the individual nations and groups of people. Yeah. So, to sum up, we could say that cosmic science explains where we are in evolution, and there is perhaps reason to forgive ourselves for the things we do that give us a bad conscience.
Absolutely, and to work on it. And as we also said, it's quite good actually to talk to other people about these feelings we have of guilt and shame and so on.
Yes.
It's a little bit like trolls, that when they get into the light, they will disappear.
Oh, I see. Yes.
Yeah. You understand, troll is a Scandinavian, what can you call it?
Like a little leprechaun, but a Scandinavian one, a little being that lives in the forest.
Yeah,
supernatural being.
Yeah, something like that people were afraid of. And when they got out into the light, they couldn't stay there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so, but it's the same with shame, for example, that we all carry around shame inside of ourselves, but if we talk to someone about it, it might just disappear. We realize it's nothing to be ashamed of. So in that way, bring it into the light. And of course, we should also think about not judging other people. not saying this and that, and well, we talked about gossip before, and so it's actually something which is a part of the killing principle, we could say. It's killing a little bit of their what did you say? The
joy in living.
Yeah, the joy in living.
Yeah.
So we should enhance the joy of living instead. So, and Martinus says one thing that is actually very interesting. He says that our conscience is in contact with the Holy Spirit. And the Holy Spirit in Martinus' vocabulary is cosmic consciousness, you could say.
Yeah.
So in a way, even though we are not cosmic conscious, we are still in contact with that through our conscience.
Uh-huh.
So it's a way that spiritual knowledge is linked to us. And I think it's very beautiful, because we can't really know everything right now, but we can sort of sense it inside ourselves. We have this connection, and it can get stronger and stronger when we work on it.
On that note, I'll say thank you very much, Karin Jansson, for once again visiting our podcast. Over and out from the Martinus Center in Klint.